What I am about to reveal has been deliberately kept from you, not by conspiracy, but by the natural order of knowledge itself. Truth gravitates toward those prepared to wield it, and what you are about to understand is a principle so fundamental, so architecturally essential to reality, that the mere act of comprehending it begins your transformation. The pharaohs of ancient Egypt did not rule through force alone. They did not maintain dynasties spanning centuries through military might or economic dominance. There existed a deeper mechanism, a principle so profound that modern scholars, fixated on material explanations, have completely missed its essence. What you are about to discover is the invisible architecture beneath visible power, the hidden law that allowed ordinary men to become living gods in the eyes of millions, to command the construction of monuments that still defy explanation, to establish legacies that echo through millennia. This principle operates today just as powerfully as it did 5,000 years ago. Yet those who understand it remain silent, while the masses scramble for surface-level strategies that can never produce true dominion over reality. There is a reason why certain individuals seem to bend circumstances to their will, while others remain perpetually at the mercy of external conditions. There is a reason why some people command rooms without speaking, why others follow them instinctively, why opportunities flow toward them like water seeking its level. There is a reason why specific minds throughout history have risen from nothing to reshape entire civilizations, while most fade into obscurity despite equal or greater effort. That reason is not charisma, not intelligence, not even ruthless ambition. It is alignment with a law that the pharaohs understood with crystalline clarity, a law they encoded into every aspect of their civilization, from the geometry of their temples to the rituals of their daily existence. This law is as impersonal as gravity, and as intimate as your next breath. It governs the rise and fall of kingdoms, and the trajectory of individual lives. It explains why your current results are exactly what they must be given your current state, and why different results require not different actions, but a different self. The pharaohs knew something about the nature of consciousness and reality that has been systematically obscured by materialist thinking. They understood that power is not taken, it is radiated. That authority is not enforced, it is recognized. That reality does not resist those who have achieved a particular internal state. It yields to them as naturally as your reflection yields to your face. The ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge that predates their civilization, wisdom inherited from sources now lost to history. In their cosmology, in their understanding of divine kingship, in their obsession with transformation and resurrection, they encoded a principle that modern psychology is only now beginning to rediscover through entirely different language. The pharaoh was not simply a political leader. He was understood to be the living embodiment of Horus, the divine mediator between heaven and earth, the axis upon which cosmic order pivoted. This was not mere propaganda or primitive superstition. It was the practical application of a law concerning the relationship between consciousness and manifestation. The pharaoh underwent initiations designed to fundamentally alter his sense of identity, to dissolve the boundaries between his individual self and the cosmic forces he represented. Through elaborate rituals conducted in the inner chambers of temples, through years of training in mystery schools, through practices that would transform his very conception of who and what he was, the pharaoh learned to inhabit a state of consciousness that naturally commanded reality to conform to his assumption. What the ancients understood and what modern science is finally beginning to validate is that consciousness is not a byproduct of matter, but the primary creative force of existence itself. The principle the pharaohs mastered can be stated simply, though its implications are staggering. Your external world is not an objective reality that exists independent of you. It is a mirror, a reflection, an externalization of your internal state. Not your thoughts, not your wishes, not your hopes or fears, but your fundamental assumption about who you are and what is true. The Pharaoh did not hope to be divine, did not wish for authority, did not work toward godhood. He assumed it as a living fact, and reality had no choice but to reflect that assumption back to him in the form of unwavering devotion, miraculous circumstances, and the spontaneous organization of millions of lives around his will. This is not belief, which is fragile and requires constant reinforcement. This is not confidence, which can be shaken by external events. This is assumption, the bedrock upon which consciousness constructs its experience of reality. What you assume to be true about yourself with such certainty that you never question it, with such depth that it operates below the level of conscious thought, becomes the organizing principle around which your entire experience arranges itself. The masses live in hope and fear, perpetually seeking validation from external circumstances, waiting for permission from reality to become what they wish to be. The pharaohs and the elite who understand this principle today begin from the end. They inhabit the state first and watch as reality rushes to confirm what consciousness has already established as fact. This principle operates according to what the Hermetic tradition calls the law of correspondence. As above, so below. As within, so without. Your external circumstances are not causing your internal state. Your internal state is projecting your external circumstances. This is not metaphor. This is not spiritual poetry. This is the actual mechanism by which reality functions, and every moment of your life provides evidence of this law in operation. Consider the individual who carries themselves with the assumption of worthlessness. They do not walk into rooms wondering if they will be rejected. They know they will be rejected because rejection is what reality looks like when experienced from the state of worthlessness. And because they know it, because they assume it with such unconscious certainty, they generate it. Their body language communicates it. Their energy radiates it. Their very presence invites it. And when rejection comes, they do not see it as the inevitable reflection of their inner assumption. They see it as external evidence that justifies their assumption, which deepens the assumption, which generates more reflection, which provides more evidence. This is the prison most humans live in, mistaking the mirror for the source, fighting with reflections instead of changing the face. The pharaohs understood that true power begins with a radical reorientation of consciousness. They did not seek to convince reality of anything. They did not negotiate with circumstances. They did not wait for external validation before assuming the state of divinity. They underwent initiation specifically designed to shatter the illusion of separation between self and cosmos, to install at the deepest level of consciousness the assumption that they were not merely connected to divine power, but were its living expression. Once this assumption became their permanent state, once they inhabited it so completely that they could not remember ever being otherwise, reality had to conform. Their word became law not because they enforced it, but because consciousness, when aligned with this principle, commands the quantum field of potentiality to collapse into specific manifestation. The ancient texts speak of the pharaoh's voice as having creative power, of his words bringing things into existence, of his decrees altering the very fabric of reality. This was not mythology. This was observable fact, the natural result of consciousness operating from the assumption of absolute authority. What separates those who build empires from those who serve in them is not intelligence or opportunity, or even ruthless determination. It is the depth and permanence of their assumption about their relationship to reality. The masses assume they must earn, must prove, must convince reality to grant them what they desire. This assumption is their prison. They live perpetually in the state of wanting, which by its nature confirms lack, which generates experiences of lack, which validate the assumption of needing to want. The pharaohs and the modern elite who consciously or unconsciously apply this principle assume they already are what others hope to become. They do not strive toward authority, they radiate it. They do not chase success, they attract it as naturally as a flame attracts moths. They do not fear failure, because failure is not a concept that exists in the state they inhabit. Your reality cannot produce what contradicts your fundamental assumption about yourself. This is why lottery winners return to poverty, and why those who have built fortunes, even after losing everything, rebuild with bewildering speed. The external circumstance changed, but the internal assumption did not. Consciousness creates consistently. The principle reveals itself everywhere once you understand what you are looking at. Watch the individual who enters a negotiation already assuming they will win. Not hoping, not confident, but assuming with the same certainty they assume gravity will hold them to the earth. Before a word is spoken, the outcome is established. Their energy communicates what their consciousness has already decided, and the other party responds to that communication on a level far deeper than verbal exchange. Watch the entrepreneur who launches ventures with the unshakable assumption that success is inevitable. Obstacles appear and are navigated not with anxiety, but with the calm certainty of someone who knows they are watching their assumption externalize. Watch those who face devastating loss, yet remain unmoved in their sense of self. The external collapsed, but the internal remained intact, and because the internal is the cause and the external is the effect, reconstruction begins immediately and often surpasses what was lost. What you are witnessing is not positive thinking, not perseverance, not even talent. You are witnessing consciousness creating according to its nature, which is to externalize its internal assumptions. The pharaohs encoded this knowledge into every aspect of Egyptian civilization. The pyramids themselves were not merely tombs, but transformation chambers, structures designed according to precise geometric and acoustic principles to facilitate the pharaoh's transition from one state of consciousness to another. The hieroglyphic texts carved into temple walls were not historical records, but instruction manuals for consciousness, maps of internal territory that, when properly navigated, would alter one's fundamental relationship to reality. The daily rituals performed by priests were not superstitious ceremonies, but deliberate practices to maintain and reinforce the state of consciousness necessary for cosmic order to manifest through human agency. Everything in Egyptian culture pointed toward this central truth, that consciousness precedes manifestation, that identity determines destiny, that who you are internally must externalize itself through the circumstances, relationships, and opportunities that constitute your external life. The mystery schools taught this principle through direct experience, not intellectual understanding. Initiates underwent processes that would temporarily dismantle their previous sense of self, thrust them into ego death, and then reconstruct them according to a higher assumption about their nature and capacities. Those who survived these initiations emerged as different beings, literally unable to return to the limitation of their previous identity, because they had experienced themselves as something vast, something eternal, something that wielded rather than begged. Your current identity is not you. It is a construct, a collection of assumptions you have made about yourself and accepted as truth until they became invisible, operating automatically beneath conscious awareness. Every limitation you experience is not external reality imposing itself upon you, but your own consciousness projecting limitation and encountering it as if it originated elsewhere. The pharaohs understood that liberation begins with recognizing this, with seeing clearly that you are not discovering yourself, but deciding yourself moment by moment through the assumptions you maintain. What you defend, you remain imprisoned by. What you assume without question becomes the boundary of your possibility. The question is not whether you are creating your reality, you are, whether you know it or not. The question is whether you are doing so consciously or unconsciously, deliberately or by default. Most humans inherit their assumptions from family, from culture, from early experiences that installed beliefs about worthiness, capability, and deservingness. They then spend their entire lives creating circumstances that validate these inherited assumptions, calling it reality, never recognizing they are hypnotized by conclusions they never consciously chose. The transformation this principle offers is not gradual improvement of your external circumstances. It is complete reconstruction of your internal state, which then has no choice but to manifest as different circumstances. You cannot change your life by changing your behaviors, if your behaviors originate from an unchanged assumption. The alcoholic who stops drinking through willpower while maintaining the identity of addict will either return to addiction or replace it with another compulsive behavior, because the assumption generating the behavior remains intact. The business owner who employs new strategies while maintaining the assumption of struggle will find new ways to struggle, because consciousness creates consistently from whatever state it inhabits. What the Pharaohs demonstrated through the stability of their dynasties, through the impossible scale of their monuments, through the devotion they inspired across generations, is that reality will move mountains to validate what consciousness assumes as fundamental truth. They did not build empires and then assume divinity. They assumed divinity, and empires assembled themselves around that assumption. Because manifestation is not reward for proper assumption. Manifestation is assumption externalized. The modern elite, those who rise to positions of extraordinary influence and maintain them despite all forces that should topple them, operate according to this principle, whether they consciously understand it or not. Observe carefully, and you will see them making decisions that make no logical sense from the perspective of someone trying to convince reality of something. They walk away from opportunities the masses would desperately cling to because the opportunity does not match their assumption about themselves. They enter situations that should intimidate them with a calm certainty that communicates, on a level deeper than words, that reality will conform to their presence. They face opposition and do not fight it, do not defend themselves, do not try to prove anything, because those who truly embody authority do not need to convince anyone of it. Authority, like all states of consciousness, communicates itself instantly and wordlessly. Those who encounter it recognize it and respond to it automatically. This is why certain individuals generate loyalty without trying, why others follow their lead without questioning, why opportunities manifest in their path without seeking. They are not doing things differently, they are being differently, and reality reflects being, not doing. What happens inside you when you read these words reveals your current relationship to this principle. If resistance arises, if something within you protests that this cannot be true, that external circumstances are solid and independent and unchangeable, that people and situations have power over you that you cannot overcome, you are feeling the defense mechanisms of your current identity, protecting itself from dissolution. Your ego, which is nothing but the collection of assumptions you currently identify as yourself, will fight for its survival. It will offer you seemingly logical arguments for why this principle cannot work. It will point to past failures as evidence. It will generate fear about what would happen if you actually released your grip on limitation and inhabited a different assumption. This resistance is not your enemy. It is proof that you are approaching something true, something that threatens the structure that has kept you small, something that if fully embraced would require you to abandon the comfort of your familiar prison for the vast uncertainty of your actual nature. The Pharaohs faced this same resistance. The initiations they underwent were designed to push them past this threshold, to create experiences so intense that the old identity could not maintain itself, that the assumptions that felt like immutable facts revealed themselves as choices that could be unmade. You must begin by observing your assumptions without judgment. Not your conscious thoughts, those are surface level, but your deep assumptions that operate invisibly. Watch what you do not question. Watch what you automatically believe about yourself in various contexts. Notice how you behave differently when alone versus observed, how you present differently to authorities versus subordinates, how certain situations trigger automatic contractions in your sense of self, while others allow expansion. These variations reveal that your identity is not fixed. You are already shifting between different assumptions depending on context. What you have not done is consciously chosen which assumption to permanently inhabit. You have allowed circumstance to determine your state, instead of allowing your state to determine circumstance. The transformation begins when you realize that identity is not something you discover, but something you decide, and reality has no choice but to reflect your decision back to you as experience. The practice the Pharaohs employed, translated into contemporary terms, involves inhabiting the end state as present fact, not visualizing it as future possibility, not hoping for it as distant dream, but assuming it as current truth. If the state you desire is authority, you do not work toward it, or prepare for it, or prove yourself worthy of it. You inhabit the internal experience of authority now. You feel how authority feels in your body. You perceive reality through the eyes of authority. You make decisions from the state of authority. You speak with the certainty of authority. And you do this not for 5 minutes during meditation, but as your permanent state of consciousness, until you cannot remember ever being otherwise. This is not pretending. Pretending implies you know it is false. This is assuming, which means accepting as true without question or doubt. When you assume authority at this depth, when it becomes your permanent state rather than temporary practice, your body language changes automatically. Your energy shifts. Your presence communicates something different, and people, responding to this communication on an instinctual level, begin treating you as the authority you have assumed yourself to be, which reinforces the assumption, which deepens the state, which generates more reflection. The resistance you will encounter is not external. Reality does not resist consciousness. Reality reflects consciousness. The resistance is internal, the voice that tells you this is impossible, that you are not qualified, that you need permission, that you must earn it first, that others will reject you, that you will be exposed as a fraud. This voice is not truth. It is your previous assumption defending itself. Every time you return to limitation, every time you doubt, every time you wait for external validation before assuming the state, you are choosing your prison over your power. The Pharaohs could not afford this wavering. Divine kingship admitted no uncertainty. Once assumed, it had to be maintained absolutely, because the moment the Pharaoh doubted his divinity, the moment he fell from the state into hoping or wishing he was divine, the spell broke. Consciousness creates from whatever state it inhabits most consistently. The question is not whether you can maintain the desired state for a moment. Anyone can do that. The question is whether you can make it your permanent dwelling place, the ground you return to automatically, the assumption so deep it operates beneath thought. What you are about to understand will separate you permanently from those who remain asleep to this principle. The Pharaohs did not build their empires through better strategy or superior resources. They built their empires by embodying a state of consciousness that made empire inevitable. They understood that authority is not something you take from others, but something you claim in yourself, that others then recognize and respond to. They knew that power is not external force but internal alignment, that when consciousness assumes something with sufficient depth and permanence, reality has no choice but to validate that assumption through corresponding manifestation. This is not magic. This is not mysticism. This is the mechanical operation of the relationship between consciousness and experience, and it has been functioning this way since before humans existed, and will continue functioning this way long after we are gone. You have been creating your reality according to this principle your entire life. The only question is whether you will now do so consciously. The life you are living right now is the perfect reflection of the assumptions you have maintained most consistently. Not your wishes, not your intentions, not your efforts, but your assumptions. The job you have, the relationships you attract, the opportunities that appear or do not appear, the respect you receive or do not receive, the circumstances that surround you. All of it is consciousness manifesting as experience. If you do not like what you see, arguing with the reflection is futile. You must change the face. You must identify the assumption generating the unwanted experience and replace it with an assumption that would generate the desired experience. And then you must inhabit that new assumption so completely, so permanently, that your consciousness cannot remember ever assuming otherwise. This is the work the pharaohs did in their initiations. This is the work the elite do consciously or stumble into through circumstances that force them beyond their previous identity. This is the work you must do if you wish to stop being victim of reality and become its conscious creator. Your old self cannot enter your new reality. The assumptions that generated your current life cannot generate a different life. You must be willing to die while still breathing, to release your grip on who you thought you were, to step into an assumption about yourself that feels unauthorized and unearned and impossible. And you must hold that assumption against all evidence to the contrary, until the evidence shifts, which it must, which it always does, because consciousness is cause and circumstance is effect. The pharaohs understood this with such clarity that they built an entire civilization around it, encoding the principle into stone and ritual and cosmic symbolism, so that even when the living knowledge was lost, the maps remained for those prepared to read them. You are reading one such map now. The question is whether you will remain content with understanding it intellectually, or whether you will apply it with the totality required for transformation. Half measures produce nothing. Wavering produces confusion. Total commitment to inhabiting a new assumption about yourself produces miracles, not because the universe rewards you, but because you are the universe localized. And when you change internally, your localized experience of the universe must change to match. This is the hidden principle pharaohs used to build their empires. This is the principle operating invisibly in every life that inspires awe. This is the principle available to you now, waiting only for your decision to assume what you have been afraid to claim.